Hello, recently we went to Berlin for 3 nights. So it was the first time I've actually ever been to Berlin, and it's a place that I've always wanted to go to. Obviously with Berlin, there's a lot of history there, a lot of art and culture, and so I was definitely excited to see what it's actually going to be like, especially after hearing so many good things about it. So in this video you're going to be seeing what we did and what happened while we were there. And I'll give you some local information about if you wanted to visit, what you can do there, and what stuff is free, what stuff was good, and give you a little bit of history as well. So enjoy. We woke up early in between 4 and 5 AM to head towards Stansted Airport. The flight was half empty, it was easy. We did have to wear masks the whole time, but after an hour and 40-something minutes we could finally see Germany below us. Once we got our suitcase, we headed to the train station. It was a short while until we made it to Friedrichstrasse, and then we walked towards our hostel, going past Museum Island along the way. So we were a bit early to check in to our hotel, but we were allowed to leave our suitcases at the hostel. So from the hostel we walked past Museum Island again, and we decided to learn a bit more about German history. So we headed to the German History Museum.
We go to the Deutsche Historic Museum.
Learn about Germany.
And see that there's loads of history about Germany.
So watch out for some exhibitions. Although we're going to the free ones though. That's not the free one, so we're now heading to the free one. Once we found the correct entrance for the free exhibition, we were now in the Deutsche History Museum's permanent exhibition. Inside there you can see basically German history from the Middle Ages to the fall of the Berlin Wall. You get to see exhibitions on the Weimar Republic, and basically each area is set out to tell a different period of German or Europe history. So you can see propaganda from World War II, you can see armour from the Crusades, you can read about Luther as well. So, what do we think about the Deutsche History Museum? Do you like it?
I did like it. There was a lot of information.
And it was free. Yeah, make sure you got comfy shoes on if you're planning on visiting. Yeah, it was good. I feel enlightened.
Learned a lot about Germany.
We carried on walking through Under den Linden, which is basically the main street dominated by impressive buildings. We visited the new guardhouse, which contains the memorial for victims of war and tyranny, and then after visiting this memorial site, we decided that we were going to get some food.
8-1 of the world. Actually 10th after China and Andre the Giant. Then you got tiny pasta. That's my pizza.
Our next stop was at Tranin's Palace, which is also known as the Palace of Tears, as it marks a spot where East Berliners say goodbye to West Berliners during Soviet times. It contains original decor, stories from victims of the time, as well as the actual checkpoints that people would have crossed, which also includes a mirror at the back on the roof, so the guards can actually see what you're keeping behind you as well if you're hiding anything. After leaving there, we then proceeded to go through the Brandenburg Gates and headed towards the memorial for murdered Jews of Europe. It's an impressive site, but we're going to give you more details about this site later as we visited again when we did our walking tour. Chilling on a bench, killing time.
In the cool.
In the cool. before the Reichstag tour. Reichstag tour.
What?
I just had a flashback to the school trip.
Why did you come here?
Yeah, we came here, it was dark,
Yeah.
and we started trying to scare each other in all the trees.
Really?
It was literally pitch black, like you couldn't see anything. Yeah.
Crazy.
We then carried on walking through the Tiergarten, where we saw various memorials for homosexuals, for Soviets, for Sinti and Roma gypsies, and we were making our way towards the Reichstag, where we had booked a free evening tour of the Reichstag Dome. I have to admit that this bit was probably my most favourite part of the whole trip. So we had the evening tour of the Reichstag Dome, and we got to witness the sun setting down on Berlin, which was absolutely stunning. The Reichstag Dome itself is a glass dome in which you can see into the chambers in which their politicians carry out their meetings. And it's kind of a constant reminder for those politicians that everyone is watching them, because you're at the top of it watching them down. But just witnessing the sun falling down onto Berlin again was just simply amazing, and I would love to do it again. We went at the perfect time.
You've got a giant panda over there. It's a panda is native to Germany.
And this is us walking away from the gate, the Brandenburg Gate. I'm walking away. Who sang that? Craig, of course. After an exhausting day of walking around and visiting numerous sites, we decided to head back towards our hostel. So that was the end of day one. I have to say that the evening of day one was probably one of my favourite parts of the trip. Just simply witnessing the sun going down onto Berlin was just incredible. We went genuinely at the most perfect time. Seeing the Brandenburg Gate at night time was brilliant. And as you can see, we did a lot of activities on day one, especially a lot of activities that were free. The Brandenburg Gate was free, you just need to book ahead of time, so they're aware of how many visitors they have at the top of the dome. But I would 100% recommend that anyone who wants to visit Berlin should try and do the same, and try to pick a time at the evening as well, so you too can see the sun going down. Once we got back to the hostel, we pretty much just slept straight away, and we got up early for the next day and headed towards the Berlin Wall memorial, in which they still had parts of the Berlin Wall intact. Off we go to the Berlin Wall memorial.
Squads of 4, sometimes 5 members of the People's Police with fixed bayonets. And when I look out over this ruined lot, this was pointed.
And now we're heading over to that building.
So that building is the new synagogue, which we weren't allowed to take pictures in, but it basically contains a museum in it for €7. From there, we headed towards the Contemporary Art Museum, which we had to pre-book ahead of time, and it was okay. There were loads of different exhibitions, some of it interesting, some of it just slightly maybe too weird, and it was okay. Beth clearly enjoyed it, as you can probably see in the video. It's probably not for everyone, especially with the price of it, but you can see some Warhol exhibitions there, as well as some other interesting contemporary art. So if that is your thing, I would definitely recommend you go to it. If contemporary art is not your thing, maybe give it a miss. I'm making sure I'm capturing you with your favourite piece of art. The classroom curtains.
I'm calling it triple blinds.
After Triple H. After a quick lunch, we decided to head towards the Resistance Memorial. Die. We again found ourselves walking through a tier garden, which again is beautiful. We saw a man practicing his saxophone, and we just basically messed about here. Our path is blocked. She did it! She did it! And the crowd goes nothing. The Resistance Memorial Centre is most famously known for its connection to Klaus von Stauffenberg and his failed plot to kill Hitler in July 1944. This is also known as Operation Valkyrie. Today, it contains numerous exhibitions on German resistance to Nazism, and you can see accounts of individuals and groups who helped to resist against the Nazis. You will see names like Oskar Schindler, as well as some other less known figures as well. You can see how different groups like Romas or Sintis or Communists tried to fight against the Nazis. We also learnt about a man called George Elser who also tried to assassinate Hitler in 1939 by placing a bomb at a rally that Hitler and other top-ranking Nazis were going to be at. If he had succeeded, we can only imagine what the world would have been like today. At this point, it's probably important to note that we actually visit the Resistance Memorial Centre again the next day because we had already booked a walking tour. Now, originally the walking tour was meant to be early on in our holiday, but due to issues, the walking tour had to occur on the last day. What's interesting to note is that the tour guide who we had, who you'll see later on in this video, talked about how the Resistance Memorial Centre is actually quite a hidden gem for tourists because it was only recently translated, so the exhibitions are available to access for English speakers. Again, it's a free exhibition, and we definitely learnt a lot when we were there about individuals who fought against the Nazis, but also some of the bigger plots to actually try and assassinate the Nazis, such as George Elser or von Stauffenberg. So I definitely 100% would recommend visiting this centre, and you'll hear some more information about it towards tomorrow's section. So we carried on walking, deciding to head to Checkpoint Charlie. It was on this way that we got to see some oddities like the Keith Haring statue. We saw famous sites of uprisings in East Germany. We also just saw some other random statues on our way towards Checkpoint Charlie. Checkpoint Charlie is very touristic, with various American fast food chains, a stone's throw away from it, and it made it clear that we were definitely 100% in the American sector. Enjoying our walks.
The top of the church in the shadows of the TV tower. Beth's commentary on modern day secular life. So currently on Museum Island, that contains several museums. Berlin Dome, the TV tower. Let's go in. And Beth's ready.
Drinking fizzy water.
Drinking fizzy water, carbonated water, because she's edgy. Still water isn't good enough for her.
I wanted to still.
But we don't know what still is in German.
We ended up not going into the cathedral, basically because our feet were hurting and we just wanted to go to our next stop.
So the DDR Museum is what we're heading to, just behind the cathedral dome. Gotta go over the bridge, so it's just past Museum Island. Beth is going to show us the way. She's been leading the whole tour.
The DDR Museum is an interactive museum that looks at Soviet life in East Berlin.
There's pictures of naked women. Oh, it's a dead end.
This museum is definitely worth visiting. It's one of the more enjoyable and informative museums that we've been to, and especially after a long day of just walking, it was actually very fun to do.
Tell us what you know.
Guess who's knackered? This one. Snacking.
Now we're walking along the German river, but we don't know what it's called.
And that marks the end of day 2. So day 2 was a jam-packed full day. Again, loads of different free exhibitions or interesting museums. We walked basically over 30,000 steps, which basically was more than 20 kilometers. We were just completely dead by the end of the day, completely dead. We would definitely recommend for you, if you were in Berlin, to go to the DDR Museum. But as you're about to see, the next day we decided that we were going to do a walking tour, which we had already pre-booked. The walking tour covered a lot of the areas that we had been to on day 1 and day 2. But what was really good about the walking tour is that he actually showed us things that we had missed. So I would 100% recommend that if you were going to Berlin, definitely do a walking tour, but also do a walking tour fast, because then you can decide based on what you see on a walking tour what you'd like to maybe visit again. On our way for a 4-hour walking tour, history walking tour. What sites are we going to see?
I don't know.
You don't know what site? Oh, okay. Well, we're going to see some World War II sites. So we met our tour guide John at Trans Palace, and he led this 4-hour walking tour about World War II history. Our first stop was the Reichstag building.
Number 1, it's just the limestone facade that's original. The entire interior of the building is from the mid-1990s. Bricks actually go through the centre of Berlin, marking out where the wall was, and here almost like a pavement. One interesting thing for the next couple of days when you're in Berlin, this plaque, you'll see it everywhere. It always faces west. So if you're reading the writing like this, you must be standing in West Berlin. Upside down, East Berlin. That'll give you good orientation.
Even though we had been here before, he actually showed us numerous different things that we missed, such as the markings of the Berlin Wall, but also a memorial for the politicians who were killed by Hitler.
First view of the gate, we'll go through the gate and look at it as it's supposed to be seen from the... It was not destroyed by bombing. And that's a total fluke, by the way, because, I mean, the US Embassy was destroyed. And this building here was heavily damaged. The best idea I've heard.
He again took us back to the memorial for the murdered Jews of Europe. and gave us time to basically walk through it. He kind of opened our eyes up to various different interpretations of what this memorial stands for, because he let us know that the architect has never actually said why he designed it the way he did. But one thing you notice as you're walking through is how quickly you can be consumed by these concrete blocks, and how the concrete blocks are all different sizes and shapes, and that none of them are the same, which can maybe represent the individual murdered Jews of the Holocaust. When you're there as well, you kind of have this weird sensation where you can see someone in the distance just for a brief second before they cross and are blocked off by another concrete, which could potentially represent like the temporariness of life. But again, that's also just a different interpretation of how this memorial can be seen. After having a quick break, John told us the meaning behind the stoplights, which basically are to attract children, which is why they show walking figures, and then he took us towards the Soviet memorial that we saw on the first night. At the Soviet War Memorial, he told us how basically this was a graveyard for the Soviet soldiers who are buried underneath. It was built immediately after World War II in the British quarters of Berlin. He also told us how the statue at the top has his hand sticking out, and how that's meant to represent his hand basically getting ready to crush totalitarianism.
We can talk about victory conference. So remember now, this was used as a runway as well. This entire long street. Until one.
It's walking. See that? So, at the Resistance Memorial, he gave us a lot more information about Klaus von Stauffenberg, and how this site was basically the site that he went to after the bomb had detonated, and he thought he had killed Hitler, and this was the spot in which he tried to take control. It is also the site in which he was executed. In the courtyard, you can see that there's a little memorial which basically looks like two steps. One is a small step, and then you've got a massive big step. Our tour guide John taught us how that is basically showing you how thinking about resistance is one small step, but trying to actually carry out that resistance is a bigger, harder step to actually carry out. Another memorial that can be found in the courtyard is a statue of a naked man with his hands tied up. This statue is in remembrance of the collaborators of von Stauffenberg, who were basically all hung naked with piano wire as punishment, and obviously executed. Now, it is reported that Hitler had actually not only watched the tape of this execution once, but he watched it twice in his personal cinema. He also showed us his house that we had actually mentioned the day before.
Yeah, this is what I was talking about a little bit earlier. You can see the glass panel there. It says the scars of remembrance. So this is all small arms fire. It's all bullet damage. We know exactly who was responsible for the 8th Guards Army of the Soviet Union. They were the ones passing through this neighborhood, heading towards the park. Berlin was basically being clamped, one army coming from the south and one from the north, and they were hoping to meet at the Reichstag building for the final battle, which eventually happened. But you can see just around this window here, for example, there was clearly a machine gun nest here or something, because look how much fire was brought to bear against this one window here, and none on top, for example.
This memorial marks the site in which it was decided to euthanize those who did not fit with our Aryan ideals, i.e. the physically disabled, the mentally unfit, the elderly and the ill. It informs you as well how over 200,000 people were murdered due to these obscene laws.
Narrowing rusty walls, you can see there, that's from 1988. It's done by Richard Serra, the American artist. And then a blue glass wall just over here, 2014, 6 years ago. Ursula Wilms, a Berlin architect who designed this as well in 2014. Now, why two memorials for the same thing? Well, the fear was that people weren't understanding how serious this site is over here, and we're just coming to see the Philharmonic Orchestra and not really informing themselves about the history of the site. The address, there was a building that stood where we see the patch of grass today. The address was Tiergartenstraße, Tiergarten Street, number 4. That was the address on this Tiergartenstraße here. The building was purchased by the Nazis in the early part of 1933 and converted into, it's a bit of a mouthful, but we'll break it down, the Government Ministry for the Laws for the Prevention of Hereditary Illnesses. Now, the perpetrators, Tata, so the perpetrators, this is probably the most important thing, were scientists, doctors, nurses, members of the judiciary, the police, etc., etc. So those elements that are there to protect the vulnerable elements of society were actually the ones who had turned against the vulnerable elements of society. You know, with almost 200,000 people being killed in, you know, what's referred to in German as Aktion T4, so Operation T4.
After walking some more, John finally took us to our final site, which is basically the site of Hitler's bunker and the site where he died. Nowadays, the site of Hitler's bunker and the site of where he died is just an ordinary car park that can be found next to some asbestos-ridden flats. The grey car to the red car marks where Hitler's first bunker was, and then the red car towards the gate marks where Hitler's second bunker was, which was the bunker in which he died. He taught us that in the final times of Hitler's life, Hitler never really left the bunker, that he only left the bunker on his birthday to award some kids medals for fighting for Berlin. We also found out that this is where Eva Braun and Hitler actually got married 2 days before he killed himself. It's also at this point where we kind of learnt about the history of Berlin deciding whether or not to mark out where Hitler's bunkers was. Nowadays, all that you can find there is this sign, which basically details a chronology of what happened in the bunker, but apart from that, it would be easy to miss this spot. And after killing himself, his body was taken out of the bunker and his body was burnt where this disabled parking spot is today. After the 4-hour walking tour, we decided to stop at the Mall of Berlin to eat. So at this point that we kind of discussed it and decided that we should go back to the memorial of the murdered Jews and actually visit the free visitor centre that can be found underneath the site. The rooms are split into 5 key areas: history, quotes from the times, families and their stories, names of victims, and sites of memorial. The most impressive and moving room in this exhibition is the Room of Names. In this room, a name of a victim of the Holocaust will appear for about 30 seconds. Then it will disappear and you'll be shown a different name. This room will display all the known names of victims of the Holocaust, so over 6 million names. Now, if you were to stay in this room and you wanted to see every single name, it would take you 6 years, 7 months and 27 days to see them all. We decided to hop onto the S-Bahn at Friedrichstraße and head towards the East Side Gallery. Now, the S-Bahn cost only €3, and once we got off the train, it turned out that we had somehow walked into what looked like some form of protest or party happening on the street. The East Side Gallery is basically a stretch of road in which the Berlin Wall, or what remains of the Berlin Wall, is covered with different graffiti and street art of famous street artists.
trying some hopefully Turkish schnitzel.
Where is she? There she is. Walking along the wall. Still there. Wait, there she is. From the East Side Gallery, we decided to take a stroll back to the city centre and basically relax for the rest of the evening. Our last evening stroll in Berlin reminded me what I kind of really enjoyed about Berlin in our short time here. We saw a lot of history, we saw burnt out churches, we saw weird sights like a massive huge picnic bench. And it basically just kind of showed me that Berlin is a place where even if you just walk aimlessly around, you will find something to enjoy.
Off we go. Now leaving Meininger from this beautiful street.
We now leave Berlin, getting ready to go for our midday flight back to London, and the journey back was pretty much hassle-free. And I'll say that I'm quite excited to say goodbye to Berlin. So, final thoughts on my visit to Berlin. I massively enjoyed it. Berlin has been one of my favourite places that I've been to. It's up there with New York and Riga. I definitely will try and visit Berlin again in the future. I think 3 days we did a lot of stuff, but Berlin just basically had loads more things that we could have done as well. For example, we never went up the TV tower for a meal, which you can easily do. We didn't go to the west side of Berlin really, like the far west side. We didn't go out too much of the nightlife, but that is also due to Corona-related reasons. And definitely Berlin is going to be a place that I want to recommend to anyone to really visit, because I think there's something there for everyone. Even if it's just simply walking around and seeing the random sites. If you're into history, there's so much history in Berlin, not even just related to World War II or to Soviet times, which are just a particular interest of that of mine. But also there's so much art there, so much culture, so much music. If you like shopping, there's so many places to shop. Berlin overall just has something for everyone. But thank you for watching this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and hopefully you'll see in the future another holiday video as well. Right, goodbye.